Now, I would like to invite to the stage someone who has accepted that mission, and it is John Hartnett, who is quite an innovator and investor here, and is going to talk. We're going to have a fireside chat here about the kind of innovation. He's a futurist in so many ways, and he's done a lot of things. And I want to invite John, join me up at the stage so we can have a conversation about the innovation imperative shaping the future of agriculture.
Thank you, Secretary.
As I indicated, John has accepted that challenge, that mission impossible of doing more with less. And John,
I feel I should have come out of the ceiling on a rope down here.
You missed the rope. We weren't quite secure. We didn't want you falling. So, but nonetheless, you're an innovative guy. Frankly, I read your bio, and it's pretty amazing what you've been involved in. I told John earlier. I don't know if you remember the Palm Pilot. But John was one of the early innovators in that area of the Palm Pilot and Handspring. And he was just delighted to know that I was a Palm Pilot user as we went forward. But he's leveraged those kind of technological skills and become interested in the food sector as well, knowing how important it is. So John, I appreciate you making the trip to really talk about the alignment of the private sector and the public sector as we go forward. You're the founder and CEO of SVG Ventures, an investment and technology firm, and you founded Thrive, which I had the opportunity to visit with you last year in California, a leading ag innovation, food innovation ecosystem comprised of the top food and technology systems using that digitization that we talked about for doing more with less in very innovative kind of ways. So I know that's kind of your bio, but what do you really do, John?
Well, I've been in Silicon Valley for 22 years, and you might notice I don't have a Silicon Valley accent or a Californian accent. I'm actually originally from Ireland.
Yes.
And I want to get my agriculture credentials out early here because I don't want to be accused of being a tech city slicker here. I think at 8 and 9 and 10 years of age, I drove my first tractor. I baled hay in County Clare in Ireland, and I worked on a dairy when I was about 14 or 15. So my early years were in agriculture. That's where I got my big values.
Right.
But in Silicon Valley, look, I had an opportunity to be there for the basically revolution of the smartphone. I think everybody in the room here today has a smartphone in their hand. It's changed their lives. But in the 90s, that didn't exist. And we had to kind of project forward to kind of say, okay, how will this happen? And we looked at some of the key trends in terms of connectivity and how that was going to project forward, driving costs down and kind of getting the size of computing to fit in your palm. And that was how they called the company. So we invented the smartphone and created about a $5 billion business, from that over about 9 years. So that's kind of a big part of my background. And about 10 years ago, I'd set up SVG Ventures, and we set up an accelerator to be able to accelerate companies. So having been a CEO, having been a COO who has set up companies, companies don't happen easily. It's hard work, hiring a great team, building manufacturing operations, distribution. So we took the approach to build an accelerator and bring key mentors around those companies to be able to help them, drive forward.
Birthing and getting them weaned is a challenge,
yes.
Right?
So I think that, that's kind of my early days. And, I got into the agriculture world really by accident. I think everybody knows Silicon Valley, but obviously California is one of the richest land in the world. Obviously a leader in the fresh food category and specialty crops. And even though Silicon Valley and Salinas Valley, you came here, last year, and it was phenomenal for you to come down and walk the fields and meet with Taylor Farms and also meet with the technology companies in Silicon Valley. But even though we were an hour apart, the world of agriculture and technology, we weren't communicating as best we should, and really trying to kind of align that was a big part of why we started to do this.
Well, that's really leads into my next question. You kind of heard the outline of the goals today of doing more with less, for using innovation and technology to get there. Talk to us a little bit about how that aligns with what you've already seen in the private sector and aligning with the public sector for these audacious goals of feeding 10 billion people by 2050?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Secretary, I mean, these goals, I think they're bold, they're ambitious, but it's something that we need. You know, this is probably the most important industry on the planet. It touches every family and every life on this planet. So this is probably the most important mission for all of us. And I think that alignment with entrepreneurs, my experience has been entrepreneurs can really change the world. They can bring new innovations, new technologies together. They can disrupt industries. And if you look at some of the sequence of events over the course of the last 20 years, whether it's either to do with fintech or entertainment or how you use information, this has all come from individuals and entrepreneurs that have actually done that. But the world of agriculture is not straightforward. It's a complex industry. Right. It's a complex supply chain. And I think having these goals really kind of set the bar, but I think really aligning the industry, aligning entrepreneurs, aligning innovators with the problems and understanding how they're going to solve those problems and use the technology and innovation to solve these problems. This is something that we did at Thrive, in California. We brought growers up from Silicon Valley or from Salinas Valley up to Silicon Valley and sat down and talked to the innovators about the problems that they have, around labor, food safety, water quality, water scarcity, etc. So I think the key thing is to enable innovation and to unleash innovation, you've got to direct it and focus it on the problems that you're most feeling the pain. And I think that will help drive a lot of the innovation going forward.
And I think that's a big change of what we at USDA have recognized is that we've got to ask the right questions to solve the biggest challenges of agriculture. Now, what I'd like to hear your honest appraisal of how does USDA do a better job as a neutral arbiter of not picking winners and losers, but facilitating the private sector research with where we need to go in that way, helping to synergize and synchronize both the production challenges out here, what are the best producers asking that needs to be solved next, and helping to align the research between both the public and the private sector. What role do you see USDA playing in that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously a very critical role in terms of there's a lot of innovation out there. I think over the last 5-10 years, farmers are seeing more sensors, more applications, more data, more solutions, and I think there's somewhat confusion out there in terms of being able to understand what's the best technology I should be using to drive yield to solve some of the challenges there. So I think guidance and education and putting a roadmap out there for farmers to really kind of understand and see what are the top technologies that they can apply. We just did our Thrive, top 50. We evaluated 3,500 startups from over 90 countries around the world.
You might want to take a little time and explain what Thrive is and how the competitive aspect of Thrive, almost like an agricultural food production Shark Tank type of thing. So.
Yeah. So we set up Thrive really as an accelerator to accelerate innovation to solve the problems of the agriculture sector. We also work with major growth stage startups that are, like companies like Plenty and AeroFarms, who are really kind of scaling on the controllable environment agriculture sector. And working with these entrepreneurs on one side, and then at the same side, we're working with farmers. So we're working with, Western growers, who are over 2,500 of the largest farmers on the West Coast of the United States. We're working with the likes of Land of Lakes across the Midwest, really to understand the challenges of the farmer. And then at the same time, we're working with probably about 3,500 startups and entrepreneurs that are solving these problems. So we're kind of sitting in the middle, and we've driven programs to address the problems with the farmers and also bring the community together. So, about 7 years ago, we founded the Ag Tech Summit with Forbes Media, and you came to visit that last year. The whole idea about that was the Thrive challenge was to bring the ecosystem together, bring farmers, researchers, innovators, entrepreneurs, corporate technology companies, so that we can get after these problems. So it's a combination of the foundation of what we're doing is the ecosystem and bringing that together, and then putting programs in place, whether it's either the programs around accelerating technology, identifying the problems of the farmer, and investing behind those as well. But we've worked very closely and carefully with the industry to identify these challenges.
Well, it sounds like you and SVG Ventures and Thrive are really already doing what I've challenged all of us today to do, is to align the public and the private sector. You've gone to farmers, you've gone to taken and matched with investors, and you match with technology and innovators, entrepreneurs of finding solutions that way. So that's what I hope to really add USDA as a public sector partner of facilitating more of that. What do you have specific recommendations of how we can engage? And as you know, you're not the only one. There's a lot of interest in Silicon Valley in the food sector now, a lot of investment and a lot of interest. And it's almost like after the technology revolution, they've kind of discovered the food industry and the food supply chain that really needs focusing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when investors and Silicon Valley, big companies look at this sector, the agri-food sector in the full supply chain is an $8 trillion industry. Yeah. When you look at some of those graphs that you talk about in terms of a growing population, growing to 10 billion people, but also a changing consumer, 50% of the current population is Gen Z or millennials who are changing the way they're consuming and eating food. Yeah. And at the same time, you've got the challenges around water scarcity and all the challenges around labor, et cetera. So that gap, it's hard to keep doing what you're doing. You have to innovate. And I think that's where we've kind of focused is on the innovation in those areas. But then as we kicked into this, we have to get the entrepreneurs aligned with the problems. How we did that was we put a challenge out to entrepreneurs. So instead of a generic challenge and saying, hey, let's increase productivity by 50%, we're saying, okay, robotics automation is going to make this impact. Controlled environment is going to make this impact. Bioscience is going to make this impact. And digitization and data is going to make those impacts. So kind of breaking down the aspects of this, putting a challenge out to 5,000 entrepreneurs from around the world and getting them to kind of come up with the ideas, the innovation, and then pitch live on stage. 5 years ago, we brought entrepreneurs from around the world into the Western Growers. It was a group like this, and the sharks on the stage were the farmers asking the tough questions in terms of how much is this going to cost me? Right. How is it going to improve my yield? So it's really kind of putting the entrepreneur and the farmer together and addressing those those challenges. And those kind of programs like the challenges, I think can be very, very impactful. So I think we need to go out to industry with these challenges that you've set the bar, and go out not just to industry in the United States, but worldwide. Right. There are countries around the world here like Israel. You visited Netherlands, earlier this year. I just came back from Australia yesterday. You look at countries, obviously Canada, Brazil, they have all the same challenges. They are innovating as well. How can we collaborate with those countries as well, and maybe get some of the best from some of these other countries to make us, more competitive in what we're doing. So I think there's a combination of the global aspect, aligning the problems, and focusing on these. And I love what you've done here. I mean, having a scorecard, having it right up there, transparent with regard to this is the bar we're going for. We're going to hold a team accountable for this. This is the roadmap, and then we're going to measure this year by year and see how we're performing. I don't play American football, but I play soccer and rugby, and you can be on the field, but if you don't score goals, you're not winning. Yeah, that's right. And we've got to score those goals. So I think having that kind of a transparent view, I think, is going to be very, very important as we move forward here.
What you described as far as segmenting the focus of research, I didn't have time to get into it this morning, but that's exactly what we want to do with our USDA Agricultural Research Service, is really to identify the real challenges and problems. Where are the barriers? What are the limitations here? And deal with those things in various sectors. And I know Dr. Hutchins will be talking more to our industry as a whole about that, to do that as we go forward. So we look forward. That's a great strategy, and I hope you don't mind us copying that role. Now, I know probably what's on the mind, and my mind and the mind of many people out there. We want you to give us a peek into the future. You have a front row seat at some of these types of industries that are burgeoning out here and just developing, whether they're just sprouting out of the ground or whether they're growing good. And tell us what you see. What's the future of some of the exciting things that you think is going to help us meet some of these goals?
Yeah, I think if I look at it in a couple of ways. Obviously, we're looking at entrepreneurs and seeing the technology that they have. Venture capital is investing into the future, and where is venture capital going and placing the bets for the future in terms of technology. So when we did the analysis of where all these dollars are going in terms of venture capital, obviously biosciences is going to continue to drive the way in terms of doing more with less. But I think precision agriculture, I think, is going to step up in a really big way. I think investment in controlled environment agriculture, there's $1 billion already gone into this as a category from the private sector. So companies like Plenty and AeroFarms, for example, they've raised $600 million. They're no longer little startups. These companies are scaling. They're growing leafy greens. They're testing out berries today. And I see this as being a really interesting supplement to the challenge that we have. I don't see controlled environment and vertical farms as a competitive force. I do see it supplementing what we're doing, but I see that as a kind of a key path going forward. I also see that in terms of the supply chain itself, putting farms in the distribution center or vertical farms, I think is definitely going to be taking place in the next few years. Robotics automation has played a major role in what we're doing today. I think investment into this space again has not at the same level as it should be. I think this is an important area where we can drive automated vehicles there's nobody on the vehicle, and that they're actually driving and doing the weeding and the seeding and driving the solutions there. And I think that's what you're going to start seeing. There's companies, I think you met in Silicon Valley, a company called FarmWise and Blue River Technologies. These are some of the technologies that already exist. And I think they're going to scale.
Let me tell the audience about that. I didn't realize that this was one of the companies that you had helped to accelerate there. Yeah. But we were in the Salinas Valley, and these two guys showed me this machine where, as you know, they'll put many, I believe it was cabbage there, many seeds in the row, and then you had labor come through there and thin out the most unproductive in a space there to leave hardy plants there at a regular space. Well, this machine autonomously went down the row. It had optics there that would choose the most healthy looking seedling that had come up there, inject some nutrients into that, and unfortunately for those weaklings, it put them out of their misery. And so that was what I saw autonomously saving, I think, about a crew of 25 laborers and doing it like 5 or 10 times faster. Yeah. So that was a great example that I saw right there, what innovation, sensor technology, optic technology can do, autonomously driven. It was pretty amazing.
I mean, one of the other things is, Driscoll berries, as you probably know, are driving robotics into harvest automation, picking strawberries. It's going to be pretty amazing as you kind of see that kind of scale today. I think the other one is data. I mean, data is one of the issues that is out there. Data without AI and analytics is useless. At the same time, it's a challenge in terms of the trust and sharing that information. So I think this is going to play a key role in terms of the future. Secretary, I would say one thing that, when we were in the smartphone industry, when Apple announced they were coming into the iPhone, it was 2007. But the technology was around for 10 years beforehand. When the internet started, the technology was around for 20 years. So I don't think it's something that's going to be invented in the next couple of years that's going to be the big breakthrough. I think it's going to be adoption of the technology. Right. And I think, again, this is where the USDA can help farmers to adopt some of this technology. I also feel like some of the big players that are sitting on the sidelines today, a Google, an Amazon, and a Microsoft, they are starting to embrace this space. I think once they come in, I think it will really kind of put that inflection point, in there in terms of this productivity and attaining that productivity goal.
Right. You talked about something I want to go back to for a second, because traditional agriculturalists, traditional producers sometimes hear this gee whiz futuristic kind of thing and may feel threatened. You mentioned very specifically this will be an evolution there, and it's going to be complementary, not replacing. It won't disrupt to the point of through the adoption of these techniques that most people will move to. It's not going to disrupt a livelihood aside from helping them become better. So it's going to become complementary rather than desecrating.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I guess if we look at, vertical farming, I mean, why doesn't any farmer here have their own vertical farm? Why can't they run their farm in a supply chain as well? So I think you're going to see this change. Obviously, there's a couple of early players like Plenty and Air Farms driving this today. I think they're going to really set the bar and show the way. But does that become something that other farmers can deploy themselves, in the supply chain? I think it can be.
Yeah, with the local sourcing that consumers want today, and knowing where that came from, how it was grown, certainly that's part of it. The other thing I mentioned in my presentation was I'd love your advice and counsel on how USDA, from a regulatory perspective, can be aligned. We don't necessarily, we cannot lead the technological revolution there, but how can we make sure that regulations don't inhibit or hold it back in that way? It's a challenge here in USDA at DC to make sure our regulatory environment, the president's been very interested. In fact, I think the deregulatory environment that he's created has been almost as much a part of the economic boom that we're seeing here as tax policy. So people want to know, entrepreneurs want to know that you're not going to hold me back if I've got a great invention. So how do we do a better job aligning USDA regulatory issues with that? And I know one of the things we're dealing with right now is new breeding techniques. How do we do that in animals in that way?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a very complicated and big challenge. I think regulation will slow down innovation. It will slow down the flow and the rate of what we're trying to do. At the same time, you need regulation. Like there's significant data out there, on people's businesses, and farmers need to be sure about what's going to be done with their information in terms of privacy. So I think that there's definitely a role here to make sure that there's regulation, but at the same time, this data could make us much more productive if it's actually interpreted and analyzed accordingly. So I think that balance, is very, very important. I think one of the areas that I would say, moving on in terms of how we could drive some of the innovation is, why can't we set up super farms in a couple of key locations across the United States and start to lead the world and kind of build clusters of excellence, whether it's in Silicon Valley around digital and automation, whether it could be in Research Triangle or, various different locations. I think it's important for us to identify these key technologies, whether it's robotics automation, controlled environment, on the biotechnology side, but set up areas of excellence where we can lead not just only research, but super farms, where we can bring entrepreneurs from all over the world, put their technologies into place, and demonstrate to us that this is going to reduce the cost, it's going to increase productivity, and also we can lead the world here. So I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of create super farms that can really demonstrate this. And obviously, with connectivity as a big issue and a major challenge for the industry, it's very hard to enable technology without connectivity. I think a few weeks ago, I had my kids, we had the power outages in California with the fires, and my kids came to me, didn't realize that the lights were off, didn't realize the power was off, but the only thing they realized was there was no Wi-Fi.
That's right, yeah.
So,
Biggest challenge.
so if you think how important that is, I think in terms of every rural environment, I think this is, to me, in terms of mission, this is the biggest mission that we have. If we want to enable and light up the farms, and enable and take one hand from behind the back of the farmers, we have to drive that, connectivity, and also maybe by having super farms where we can kind of showcase, 5G in some of these areas and show what the best of innovation can do. I think these could be great areas where we can actually drive this forward.
I think you've just given USDA a good idea here to create, certainly if we can put 5G in our NFL stadiums down there, we can put it in super farms in that way to do that. But I know that I did visit in North Dakota, and Governor Burgum, who had a career in Microsoft, they were creating a smart farm environment there and doing many of the things that you're talking about. But I love the terminology super farm, and I'd love for USDA to be facilitating that, going to Congress and saying, let's create some demonstration plots out here for the future, because those ideas coming out of Silicon Valley need to be proven in the field in some places.
That's right. As I say, I just came back from Australia. We were in Melbourne, and the Victorian government are really driving hard in terms of connectivity, in the locations there, and they've created an initiative, like this. They didn't call it a super farm, but the whole idea is to have kind of a farm of the future that, that has that. I think if you look at Canada today, they've kind of come out with these super clusters, whether it's around next generation foods and protein, next generation in terms of, data, next generation, automation and robotics. So I think we need to, we're leading the world already, but I think we need to be careful that we don't get complacent.
Certainly.
And I think, having this kind of a focus in terms of having these clusters aligned with challenges that are going out to the industry worldwide or out to entrepreneurs to say, solve this problem, increase productivity by 40%, reduce our footprint by 50%, and then breaking that out, putting the challenge out to every entrepreneur, bringing them over here and putting them on our super farms. And as these super farms demonstrate the future, let's bring that right across the United States, across the Midwest and across the West Coast.
And the ecosystem we have in the United States is very fertile for that. We've got obviously private sector research, public sector research that we're talking about trying to align. We've got entrepreneurial innovators and demonstration farms over that. But we also have an extension service that from our land-grant universities that's very good of getting the best and the best ideas and the most productive ideas out to a wide cross-section of people. So just like we were talking today, we know the things that can produce soil health over no-till and cover crops and those kind of things, but we don't have universal adoption yet there.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to get, the best ideas of how soil health. I happen to believe soil health may be one of those quantum leaps that we see as we understand more of the biology that's going on in the soil itself from a productivity. We've gained a lot over genetics, and we'll continue to do genetics improvements, but I think soil health is also a huge component.
Absolutely, and again, some of the technology is already there. There's, two young girls from Stanford University set up a company called Trace Genomics. And, they're 4 years old. The company is growing and scaling, and they're really focused on this area, and they're driving the whole area on soil health. So how can a company like that scale, and how can we get that adoption of their technology into the fields across the U.S.?
Well, John, you've challenged us. We want the globe to thrive by feeding everyone and doing while we're doing right. And I think your contribution there, we're delighted that you have focused in the food and agri-food sector and the supply chain there of helping us to accomplish some of these bold goals that we have. And I look forward to a continuing relationship. We want to invite you to help us hold USDA accountable. And as you see things that could enable and facilitate the technological advances that will help us get there, I hope you'll feel free to help us do better.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary. It's an honor to be here. I know in my last 10 years, I've spent much more time in this industry, and I've been humbled by the industry, and I've been very passionate about this industry because it's really investing in our future. And when I look at our children, I look at our families, this is the industry that's going to make a difference to our world, to our health, and also to our families. So there's nothing more important than this industry, and that's why I'm really here and I'm motivated to make it happen.
Well, I think the producers in the audience today and across that hear this, I think would be very proud to hear you say that you've been humbled by the challenges and the complexities of production agriculture. That makes somebody like you that's on the cutting edge of innovation make us feel better out here.
It's easy kind of manufacturing a smartphone. It's difficult, producing food and bringing it through the most complex supply chain in the world.
In fact, some people even think it's easy farming, but we know it's not.
Thank you. Thank you.